My name is Daniel Harper, and I never thought I'd be the kind of man to write a story like this. It started 6 months ago, 6 months that turned my life into something I barely recognize. I've been married to Emily for 8 years. 8 years. We had a little house in suburban Ohio, a quiet life, the kind you see in old TV shows. I worked as a mechanic. She taught piano lessons. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Or so I thought. That day, September 12th, I came home early. My boss let me off because a shipment of parts got delayed. I walked through the door, toolbox in hand, and there it was, a pair of shiny black loafers by the stairs. Not mine. Too expensive, too polished. My stomach dropped. I heard voices upstairs, hers soft and laughing, and his deep and confident. I didn't yell. I didn't storm up there. I just listened. His name was Ethan Caldwell, some rich kid who'd inherited his dad's real estate empire. 25 years old, driving a car worth more than my house. And there he was with my wife. I stood there, frozen, my heart hammering. What do you do when everything you've built cracks right in front of you? I could have confronted them, sure, but I didn't. Instead, I slipped out quietly, drove around for an hour, and came back when his car was gone. Emily smiled at me like nothing happened. "Hey, Dan, you're home early," she said, all bright and cheerful. I nodded, forced a grin, and said, "Yes, slow day." Inside, I was screaming. I couldn't sleep that night. My name's Daniel Harper, and I was lying there next to Emily, her breathing soft and steady, like she hadn't just torn my world apart. I kept seeing those loafers in my head, shiny, mocking me. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. No, I'd turn it around, use it somehow. Ethan Caldwell had money, more than he knew what to do with. And me? I had nothing to lose. I started watching them. Not in a creepy way, just careful, quiet. I leave for work, double back, park down the street. Ethan's silver BMW showed up 3 times that week. Always around noon, when I was supposed to be at the shop. Emily would wave him in, all smiles, like they were old friends catching up. Friends. It made me sick, but I kept my cool. I had a plan forming, something wild, something I'd never have dreamed of before. Friday came, and I caught him alone. He was leaving our house, adjusting his tie, looking smug. I stepped out from behind my truck, calm, hands in my pockets. "Ethan," I said, voice steady. He froze, eyes wide. "We need to talk." He stammered. "Look, man, I don't know what you—" I cut him off. "I know everything. And I've got an offer for you." His face went pale, but I smiled. For the first time in days, I felt in control. I'm Daniel Harper, and that moment with Ethan Caldwell changed everything. We stood there in my driveway, him nervous, me steady as a rock. "An offer," he said, his voice cracking just a little. I nodded. "Yeah, you like spending time with my wife, right? I'm not blind. So here's the deal. You pay me $1,000 for every night you're here. Cash." I looked the other way. His jaw dropped. Literally dropped. I could see the gears turning in his head, shock, then calculation. "You're serious?" he asked, squinting at me like I was some kind of puzzle. "Dead serious," I said. "You've got the money. I've got the silence. Everybody wins." He laughed, a short, nervous bark, then ran a hand through his hair. "You're crazy, man," he muttered, but I could tell he was hooked. Rich guys like him, they think everything's a game they can buy their way out of. "Think about it," I said, turning to walk away. "Next time you're here, bring the cash." That night, Emily cooked dinner, spaghetti, my favorite. She chattered about her day, oblivious to the storm in my chest. I smiled, nodded, played the part. Inside, I was counting $1,000 a night, maybe 3 nights a week. 6 months of that. I'd have enough to start over. Maybe more. And Ethan? He'd be my golden goose until I was ready to clip his wings. My name's Daniel Harper, and by Monday, Ethan took the bait. I was in the garage, tinkering with an old carburetor, when I heard his BMW purr up the street. He stepped out, all slick and polished, holding a thick envelope. "Here's your money," he said, tossing it onto my workbench. I didn't flinch, just picked it up, peeked inside. 10 crisp $100 bills. "Good start," I said, pocketing it. He smirked, like he'd won something. "This stays between us, right?" I nodded. long as the cash keeps coming. That night, I heard him upstairs with Emily, laughing, talking like I didn't exist. I sat in the living room, TV on low, counting the bills again. $1,000 for a few hours of pretending. It was humiliating, sure, but it was power too. Every dollar was a brick in the wall I was building. My escape. Emily came down later, hair mussed, eyes bright. "You okay, Dan?" she asked, all innocent. "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. She kissed my cheek, and I swallowed the bile in my throat. Over the next few weeks, Ethan showed up regular as clockwork, Tuesday, Thursday, sometimes Saturday. Each time, he'd slip me an envelope, cocky grin plastered on his face. I stashed the cash in an old coffee can under the workbench. By the end of the month, I had $12,000. It wasn't just money. It was revenge, slow and cold. I'm Daniel Harper, and the months started blurring together. 3 months in, and Ethan's envelopes kept piling up, $1,000 a night, like clockwork. I'd stopped counting the times he showed up. I just counted the cash. My coffee can was overflowing, so I moved it to a lockbox in the garage. $36,000 by December. $36,000. I'd never seen that kind of money in my life. At work, I'd stare at engines, dreaming of what I'd do with it. Quit the shop, leave Ohio, start fresh. Emily didn't suspect a thing. She'd hum around the house, bake cookies, act like the perfect wife. Perfect. It was a joke, but I played along. "You seem happier lately, Dan," she said one night, stirring soup on the stove. I shrugged. "Work's good," I lied. She smiled, oblivious, while upstairs, Ethan's jacket still hung on the chair from his last visit. I wanted to smash something, but I didn't. I had a bigger plan. Ethan, though, he was getting cockier. "You're a smart guy, Dan," he said one day, handing me the envelope. Most men would have lost it by now. He laughed, like it was all a big game. I didn't laugh back. "Just keep paying," I said, voice flat. He didn't know it yet, but every dollar he gave me was a step closer to his reckoning and hers. I wasn't just surviving this. I was winning. My name's Daniel Harper, and by the 5th month, I was a different man. The lockbox in the garage held $60,000, and I could feel the weight of it, not just in my hands, but in my soul. Ethan kept coming, kept paying, kept smirking. He thought he owned me, thought I was some pathetic husband he'd bought off. But every envelope he handed over was another nail in his coffin. And Emily's. She started noticing things, little things. "Dan, why are you always in the garage?" she asked one snowy afternoon, peering at me through the kitchen window. I was counting the cash, hidden behind a stack of oil cans. "Just fixing stuff." I called back, slamming the lockbox shut. She frowned but didn't push. Good. I needed her blind a little longer. At night, she'd ramble about her students, her life, while I sat there plotting. She had no idea the clock was ticking. Ethan got sloppy, too. One night, he left his wallet on the coffee table, right there in my living room. I flipped it open, credit cards, driver's license, a photo of him with some yacht. Rich kid nonsense. I pocketed a business card with his office address. "You're slipping," I muttered to myself, tossing the wallet back. He didn't know it, but I was almost ready. 6 months was close, just a few more weeks, and I'd have everything I needed. I'm Daniel Harper, and the 6th month hit like a freight train. By March, yesterday, actually, the lockbox was bursting. $72,000. $72,000. Ethan had been consistent. I'll give him that. 3 nights a week, sometimes 4, always with that smug grin and an envelope. But yesterday was different. He showed up early, before I left for work, and Emily wasn't even subtle anymore. "Oh, Ethan's just dropping off some papers," she said, her voice too high. "Papers?" I nodded, grabbed my keys, and left, but I didn't go far. I parked 2 blocks away, walked back through the alley, and watched. They were in the kitchen, laughing, his hand on her arm. My blood boiled, but I stayed calm. I'd waited 6 months for this. I had the money, the business card, the plan. That night, after he left, I went to the garage, pulled out the lockbox, and counted every dollar one last time. Then I drove to a hardware store on the edge of town. The clerk barely looked up as I bought it, a gleaming, heavy-duty bolt cutter. Not for locks, though. For something else. Back home, Emily was asleep, clueless as ever. I sat in the dark, bolt cutter in my lap, feeling the cold steel. 6 months of playing the fool were over. Tomorrow, I'd start tearing it all down, starting with her. I'm Daniel Harper, and today, March 2nd, 2025, was the day I stopped pretending. I woke up early before the sun, the bolt cutter still cold in my hands. Emily was snoring softly, tangled in the sheets, oblivious to the storm I'd become. I didn't wake her. Not yet. I had work to do. I drove to Ethan's office, his fancy real estate firm downtown, address pulled from that business card. The building was all glass and steel, screaming money. Perfect. I waited across the street, hood up watching. He rolled in at 9, BMW gleaming, not a care in the world. I gripped the bolt cutter under my coat and crossed over. The receptionist barely glanced at me. Delivery for Mr. Caldwell. I mumbled, holding up a fake package I'd thrown together, brown paper, duct tape. She waved me through. Upstairs, his office door was half open. I stepped in, quiet as a shadow. Dan, he said, startled, standing up. I didn't answer, just swung the bolt cutter hard, right into his precious car keys on the desk. Snap. Metal bits flew. His face went white. This ends now, I said, low and steady. You're done here. Leave my house, my wife, my life, or next time it's not just your keys. He nodded, hands shaking, too scared to speak. I walked out, heart pounding, ready for the next step, Emily. I'm Daniel Harper, and driving home from Ethan's office, I felt alive, really alive, for the first time in months. Today was March 2nd, 2025, and the bolt cutter sat heavy on the passenger seat, a silent partner in what came next. Emily was waiting, probably sipping coffee, thinking everything was fine. She had no idea I just shattered her lover's smug little world. Good. Her turn was coming. I walked through the door, calm as ever. Morning, Dan, she chirped, setting down her mug. I didn't smile back. Sit down, Emily, I said, voice like ice. She froze, eyes darting. What's wrong? She asked, but I could see it. She knew something was up. I pulled out the lockbox from the garage, slammed it on the table, and flipped it open. Cash spilled out, $72,000 in crumpled stacks. Her face went pale. What is this? She stammered. This, I said, leaning in close, is what your boyfriend paid me to keep quiet. 6 months, Emily. 6 months of lies. She gasped, hands flying to her mouth. Dan, I didn't. I cut her off. Don't. I'm done listening. I grabbed the bolt cutter, held it up so she could see. You broke us. Now I'm breaking you. Her eyes widened, terrified, and I let the weight of that moment sink in. Revenge wasn't over yet. I'm Daniel Harper, and today, March 2nd, 2025, was the end of everything. Emily sat there, trembling, staring at the bolt cutter in my hand, the cash scattered across the table like dirty confetti. Dan, please, she whispered, tears streaking her face. I'm sorry. I'll stop. I shook my head. Too late, I said, voice hard. I wasn't here to forgive. I'd spent 6 months building this moment, and I wasn't backing down. I stepped closer, the bolt cutter gleaming under the kitchen light. She flinched, scooting back in her chair. What are you going to do? She whimpered. I didn't answer, just reached past her, grabbed the piano lesson schedule off the counter, and snipped it in half with one clean cut. Snap, she gasped. That schedule was her pride, her little empire of students. You don't get to play innocent anymore, I said, tossing the pieces at her feet. Your life's over here. Pack your bags. You're leaving. She sobbed, collapsing into herself, but I didn't feel sorry. I'd already rented a new place, an apartment 2 towns over, paid with Ethan's money. The lockbox cash, $72,000, was my ticket out. I walked to the garage, grabbed my tools, my clothes, and drove off. Emily was still crying when I left. Ethan was probably licking his wounds downtown. Me? I was free. Revenge wasn't loud or bloody. It was cold, calculated, and mine. I'd taken their world apart, piece by piece, and now I was starting over. Alone, but stronger.